Assalamu alaikum, friends of Bookbytes, and welcome to this week's edition of Bookbytes, where we speak about a really fantastic new collection of short stories, local short stories. They were launched just 3 weeks ago, but I'm already going to call this a classic collection. And why I say that is because even though it's a new book, I think this is a book that's going to be read for a very, very long time because of the kind of stories that are generated, the memorable characters, and it's really a social document of our time. So we're looking at this evening at Tears of the Weaver by Dr. Zaheera Jina Asvat. Like I said, it was just launched a couple of weeks ago, late July. And Zaheera Jina is well known for a number of, offerings in the literary field, but she's also an academic. She holds a PhD in mathematics education from WITS. She's a lecturer at WITS School of Education. She's the author of Surprise in the STIMU Math program for preschoolers and the editor of Tween Tales 1 and 2, Saffron, and writing the Samosa Express, which received a lot of rave reviews. In addition, she's the curator of the Josie Books and Blogs Festival, a nonprofit initiative aimed at inspiring expression through reading, writing, and the arts in the less affluent areas of Gauteng. Zaheera hails from Lenasia, or lives in Lenasia with her husband and her sons and the rest of her family. Welcome to the show, Zaheera. It's so wonderful to have this opportunity to host you on Book Bites after a fantastic launch last month. And once again, congratulations on a really lovely collection.
Jazakallah so much, Shafinaaz, for having me and for meeting you again after the 27th of July. Thanks.
I think that was a really nice start up, to the launch of your new book. But especially, I said in the introduction, I think of this as a classic already, because Tears of the Weaver, you've put together a very emotive collection. You've captured so well, the kind of flavors and characters and the feel of space. It doesn't necessarily have to be linked to one specific place, even though you write, your stories specifically with Lenasia. I think there's just this universality. In high school, we were treated to those flavors of writers like Ahmed Aesop, and we learned that our stories were capable of being captured on the page. And decades later, I'm holding in my hands this collection by you that captures communal heritage in so many ways. Speak to us about this feeling of having it out there and how you came about to put this collection together.
Okay, so the collection, I started with it in 2018. I actually started writing a novel, but it's tough writing a novel, and the novel didn't quite work out the way I wanted it to work out. And then I thought, okay, it might be actually easier to capture these stories in a short story format, and I found that it was actually much easier. And I think a lot of the stories stem from my personality with my identity, because the stories are I relate to them. They're part of me. They're part of the community I live in. They're part of the communities I lived in. So I think I just wanted to capture these type of stories. And then I wrote like about 3, and then it just went on to 4 and 5. And I remember when I was sitting on 9, I actually spoke to a friend of mine and asked her, how many does these short story collections need? And then she said it usually needs to be about 10 to 11. And that's how the stories were actually placed in the collection.
No, that's really wonderful because I enjoyed the flow of the stories and getting to know each of the characters as you move and weave, to use your word, weave your way through this anthology. You say sometimes it's easier to write in shorter format, and yet there might be some authors who say it's easier to waffle on in the form of a novel. And in the art, it really takes a talent and a skill to bring your story to some kind of resolution in the space of a short story. And you've done it successfully. So, really well done on that, and congratulations on that. Any pitfalls? What were your challenges in writing?
Okay, so you would want the story to be told in a certain way. And then sometimes you would find that it's not, you just think that the way it might be received might not be the way you want it to be received. So the thing is that with writing, you can actually kill off a character when you want to kill off a character. You can change the story as you go along. I think it became challenging for me where I think the stories are very honest. They're real reflections of what happens in society. And some people might take that as totally negative. Some people might look at it from a positive lens, as they would receive it from their own personal point of view where they would relate to it. I think that for me is I'm still experiencing that challenge of having the stories out there. How will people receive it? uh, what will people think about it, that kind of thing. I think that's still the challenge.
And in some ways, once your stories are out there, I mean, as much as you've put so much of effort into curating them, editing them, getting them out there, shaping them, and in some ways, there's a surrender. So there's that ownership and surrender that's happening in your head right now. But what's interesting for me is, and quite rightly you said, the stories will find some resonance. Some will say, "Oh,
Yes,
this sounds a bit not far fetched because it's reality, but this sounds a bit harsh or negative." But a lot of people will come up to you and say,
yes,
"I know a situation like this, or I experienced this and this and that." Like your power cut
yeah.
story,
Yes. Yes. So, like, I think all of the stories, I think to some extent, we've all experienced it. Like, I think within our culture, still, we still have these expectations of who you're going to marry, what type of person the role that person takes. And then, obviously, then once you get married, that expectation of having the child, and the expectation that the in laws have upon you on having that child. As much as people may say that we've moved away from these type of things of having certain types of mothers-in-laws, I don't think that I think certain homes have shifted, but certain homes are still the same. We still have that generational encounter where we have our younger generation that's still saying we're not going to accept this type of living, and then you'll still have the older people that will say, but this is the way we lived and we want to keep these traditions alive. These are the expectations. So as much as I think we're moving along, Lenasia and communities like Lenasia are still stuck within this, even though we post apartheid for many years, we're still caught within these structures of our culture, our religion, the rules of our religion, that kind of thing. So that whole community, that community vibe, and what we practice and how we work through those type of things. Yeah. But having said from your previous question about the challenges, I think for me it was the vulnerability of having these stories out there and having like it's like almost as if I'll be judged. So like somebody would say, but then like where do you feature in this. So I think all authors, I'm sure you would also be able to respond to that, of putting out stuff there that you're not quite certain about how others would perceive it.
I think it's definitely part of the process. And as much as I can say, well, you surrender it and you let it go and it's not part of you anymore, we want to be able to stand up for the things we've written. We want to stand up for what we believe in, because a lot of what we write is observation, what we believe in.
Yes.
So I think it's a pendulum between ownership and letting go, the surrender and the standing up for and the being part of. It's quite a nice part of the writing process,
Yeah,
I
but
think.
I don't think anyone really tells you that, you know? Like, so when I read your books, Shafinaaz, especially, I mean, I've read all of them. Like you have strong characters. You have, I think the storylines are strong if you look at it, compared to the other type of stories that I've read. And I don't think that I've actually had this discussion with you about being the vulnerable author in that whole situation. Maybe we should chat. Yeah.
I think that's a great addition to our discussions, because it's ongoing between authors and writers. Um, and I think it motivates and shapes how we write in the future as well.
Yes.
So,
And also the expectations from
coming
readers.
to your
Sorry, you were saying, I just wanted to say also the expectations from readers, because we also
right.
write for readers, but we also want to put forth what we believe in and what we want to expose audiences to this different type of writing process, but we're not sure what our readers would want from us, type of thing.
Quite so. I think you can't always preempt how your readership is going
Yes.
to sort of intercept your material, and that's part of the beauty, is creating that dialogue, creating that tension in your reader to say, is this believable, or does this bring in certain kinds of emotions and responses? Being part
Yes.
of that whole organic process.
Yeah. Yeah.
So creating characters. I mean, we often say is there really a difference in thinking when you put down on the paper, as much as we're motivated by what happens around us, when we write male and female characters, is our thinking different? Are we stretched beyond imagination? Are we more cautious about how we write our our female characters, or not? What are your thoughts on that?
So I think out of my collection, I think all the stories out of the 10 stories, 8 stories are from a female perspective. 2 of the stories are from male perspectives. I think I don't actually think that it was more difficult for me. I think I just I felt like I had to own that character and get into that character's shoes to understand what that character was going through. But I think the experiences, this actually forming that role of the character came from the character's experiences. And I think, like, if you take the Play of Power story, where you have Baji there, I would think that every old person here in South Africa, and I've got an older father, so I mean, I would understand where's he coming from. Like, I mean, if you have no electricity and you've got 4 young grandchildren in the house, and their parents are not here, and now what do you do? So I think there's a big level of frustration that we as all South Africans experience when there's electricity cuts. So experiencing that from a male perspective or a female perspective, I think would be the same thing. But then there's certain so the role of that older male person, I had to now think of it from a different sense, because he was now this tycoon of Lenasia, owning property in Lenasia, and now he's been pushed into this extremely vulnerable position where he needs to go to city power to find out what's going on with his electricity. So I think from an older man's point of view, he was the breadwinner of this family. He owns everything that's going on. He's the house's name was in his name, the name, the property rights, and everything. And now everything is being questioned there. So I think I just had to really push myself into getting into his head to see how he would experience that. And I think also with the other male character, I think that's also a situation that many South Africans go through. I mean, where we know the whole story with xenophobia, where our many South African people were retrenched from their jobs, and now they've got to make it happen and make it work. And we see trolley guys pushing trolleys every Wednesday morning here in Lenasia, collecting rubbish from the houses and walking. And this man says, but I don't want to do this job. And it also, what I was trying to get in that particular story from the man's perspective, okay, so now I've got to be the breadwinner, but don't I also have this agency, the sense of dream, the sense of hope in what I want to do, so I think that it was that kind of thing. So I think that's the difference with the characters. And like the female characters, I think I'm female, so some of the characters I the same story, try and just push yourself into that character and see how that from that character's point of view.
And I mean, you're saying your stories are, as much as they're plot driven and they're informed by the themes and the sort of tribulations and challenges that they encounter. You're talking of themes like grief and loss, dashed dreams, misplaced intentions and expectations. Those are universal.
Yes.
Those are they come across in every possible way. And this in itself will create resonance with your readership. There's no doubt about it from that perspective, whether intended or not.
Yeah, no, true. So I think also sibling rivalry. It's not only like a small community type of thing. It's something that all communities go through. Everybody goes through sibling rivalry at some point in time, So I think a lot of the themes, like you say, will just transcend across place, culture, people. It will resonate with some people. It will resonate with people from different generations. I think that's just what I try to do with this book.
And, I mean, you're talking about relationships like sibling rivalry that comes into play. No story is complete without the complexity of marriages, sibling rivalry, generational gaps which come through strongly in some of your stories. And especially when we write intimately about our community and about communities in South Africa, we know that there are specific nuances to our community, and you've captured this really well. Let's delve into some of the challenges in these stories, because we are talking about looking for or finding relevance and resonance. Let's talk about some of the challenges of capturing those themes of relationships.
Okay, so I think there was a lot of relation. There's a lot of dynamics in all the stories in terms of
Right.
relationships. Like in the first story, there's that the dynamics between the mother and the daughter, and the father and the daughter, that type of relationship. The second story also had with the daughter-in-law, the mother-in-law, that type of relationship. I think we social. We people, we
Yeah.
live in communities, we live in families, we have relationships with people, and I think in our relationships, we're bound to have all sorts of experiences, and every story captures that type of some sort of relationship that's happening. It may be between the husband and wife, or it may be between the mother-in-law and the daughter-in-law, or it was also like the one story with Juleka and her next door neighbor Nomawetu, where Nomawetu has these strong beliefs, and Juleka, those beliefs that Nomawetu speaks about, plays with Juleka. So I think we when we have relationships with people, we carry across like it's like your interactions and what happens with your interactions with people in societies, that kind of thing. And those are the type of real stories we experience on an everyday basis. And I think those stories become real to us, Shavina's, when we talk about them. And
Mm.
like I always think about, like, my mom used to always have every afternoon, her friends used to be there, and they used to all be with their knitting needles and discussing books, and I just don't have time for all of that. But that's where, like, lots of stories sharing took place, growth. They were always there for each other. They helped each other heal, that kind of thing. So I think that's what these stories do. They explore different relationships.
It's interesting when you mention something that's very significant to our communities is women's circles who hold together just what seems frivolous or seems like a sort of an afternoon gathering can become such a powerful healing circle. And the
Yes,
superstitions and beliefs we hold can sometimes cause clashes or really hold us together. They bind us together.
yes.
So those come through very strongly in many of your stories.
Yes, yeah, yeah. So I think, yeah, and I suppose we grew up with it as well, you know,
Right.
listening to these stories from so it's like the generational encounter where you're listening to the stories from the old people, and now you have these young people and these young daughter-in-laws and their expectations that come through, and that's the stories that you hear.
I mean, in these encounters, you also talk about superstitions like black magic, whether people understand these concepts or find different ways of making sense of them from different cultural backgrounds.
Yes,
All of these inform how we relate to each other, how we are
yeah.
afraid or brought closer to each other.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think also, like, in terms of our culture, we carry a lot of these superstitions. Some families more than others. I mean, like, some people would say that they don't believe in lots of things, but I know, like, it's always like this whole story of with fish as well. We have this thing in our house about, we don't want, I always tell my kids, do you really want that fish to be all alone in the fish tank, looking at you and thinking these humans are enjoying life? Do you know what I'm saying? So this whole story about birds kept in cages curse, these superstitions. So what happens actually is that then when something goes wrong, then we always say, but then we kind of knew that that would happen. But that comes from our culture. That comes from the way we speak, our relationships, the stories we tell each other, the stories our grandparents told us, that kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah.
And then I was especially interested also because I mean, you bring out perspectives like when we talk of expectations being informed by things like inheritance law, what families assume, or the lack of transparency and the assumptions that we live on, and what this means in terms of our understanding of what we're entitled to, a sense of entitlement, and what the real sort of um, I think there's huge comment on how we configure our lives around expectation and reality and the education we have around these issues. It's very important that you've captured this. Speak to us about some of the broader
Okay,
details that you bring in.
so Shafinas, we all know those stories about where the mother suddenly passes away, and now you have the daughter-in-law that's living in the house, and then her sister-in-laws just come home one day, and then they come with their cars and they come and collect all their mother's things, all their mother's belongings, including the
Yeah,
Meiji mix that the daughter-in-law has been using forever, that kind of thing. We all know those stories, do you know? We've all heard about the stories. You'll say, like somebody will say, but really, did you know that Banu passed away and her daughter-in-laws came and collected everything? The poor
right.
daughter-in-law. Do you know what I'm saying? So those are the type of stories that I wanted to capture. But I think that the story doesn't become a humorous thing. So in my the way I captured it was I captured it from that was one of the male stories as well. So from a male perspective of this boy watching all of this happening and not understanding his place within it, because there's these expectations that now he'll be the male, so the inheritance will obviously come to him. But what has transpired before that? We do have those stories. I mean, we have that stories that about the Varsaw, that's the common
Yeah,
the common word, the Varsaw, what's going to happen to the inheritance and who's going to get what, and the Islamic will and the non, and that kind of thing. And that's what I wanted to try and capture in that story as well, because there was this expectation from this boy that he and his mother would live together, and that didn't actually quite happen. And why didn't it happen? And it's like the real stories. It's every day. And it's like you say, it's not only within our communities, it can be in any community that will happen, where people would want that part of that inheritance, that part of the money that, oh, he owed me this and this and this. So I want that car from him because when we were in 20 years ago, I gave him money for Hajj or whatever, that kind of thing.
yeah.
Yeah.
And this is the power of story in being able to not just capture the essence of what's happening in these thematic considerations, but also create a conversation in your reader's mind to say, well, like you said, there's resonance or there's some tension being caused by reading the story. You have, suggested the examples of perhaps, a woman not being able to conceive and how that value is placed upon her or removed from her. I mean, let's talk about some of those conflicts that arise in relationships and how women are valued or seen based on that.
Yeah, so like I think there's all these expectations also that we have, that you need a son to take over the business or a son-in-law to take over the business. So like the woman needs to get married. Who does she get married to? Will it be just anyone or whatever? And I think I kind of explore that in the story of Farouk as well, because I think the female character there she had these expectations of who she wanted to get married to, and then it didn't being Farouk being a political person didn't quite fit into this expectation. And for me, I keep on thinking that how much will you give of yourself? Will you just give of yourself just for marriage, that kind of thing. So it's like, we have our culture. Within our culture, we've got these expectations that girls need to be married by a certain age. And then, so then they'll have, like, I know my four used to always say that we mustn't turn these boys away. We must just let everyone come every weekend. It must just be samosa run every weekend. They must just come and see you, even if you don't like them, because they bring barakat into your home, number one. And number two, if you're going to tell the family that you don't want them to come, they're going to think you have somebody. So it's like these expectations, from people and communities. And so now, and then they'll say, but why didn't she accept him? He wanted to get married to her, but so the girl has no real feature in that whole thing, and then once you get married, then there's the expectation of falling pregnant and having the child, and it's really tough, and then you want to try out medical ways of IVF and whatever, and some people might not think that it's the right way to go. And then we have the superstitions of going to Molanas, where the Molanas need to pray and give you taweez and, that kind of thing, so that you can fall pregnant. So I think that's all these expectations. And then obviously, then when you're married, then you need to fit into this role of being the ideal daughter-in-law. And what does that mean in this day and age? Because the ideal daughter-in-law in those days would be different. And I explore that also in the story, but I don't know how will that story be accepted by people. I mean, people will resonate different with it, and there will be tensions. So all of these stories try to do that, give a platform for that.
Expectations, dashed dreams, these powerful ways of being and being seen in communities, they all come through so well in your stories. And I know that these stories will definitely find resonance. And as I said, be a classic so that every household will have a copy on their shelves and be read. We wish you everything of the best with this collection, ongoing launches. I know that the book can be found at various bookstores around the country. And once again, congratulations and thank you for giving us your time this evening to really get into your mind, to
Thanks.
see how you've really sewn this piece together.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Shafinaaz. Thanks.
And all the best with future launches, inshallah. We look forward to following you on your socials. And so there
Thank
you
you.
have it. We had Zaheera Jina Asvat with Tears of the Weaver. Please do get yourself a copy. It'll make a beautiful read, a beautiful gift. And with that, that's it from us this weekend on Book Bites. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.